All right, so I'm live here with another machine learning certification that I haven't yet taken, but I have created quite a bit of material on Databricks. So I'm feeling like I'll be able to get this certification sometime before the end of the year, which is the Databricks Machine Learning certification. And I'll maybe start off with just sharing some of the content that I've created that's related to this. And so I'll go ahead and share my screen here and we'll go here. So the first place that could be a good source for learning about this is the doing ML ops with Databricks and ML Flow. And this is a course that I created for O'Reilly. That's actually kind of short. It's not too long. It's like maybe a couple hours or so, and it goes through and like walks you through really the key concepts like clusters, notebooks, PySpark, workspaces. How to use AutoML, how to do end-to-end things with Databricks, and so you can get access to this on the O'Reilly platform. And in fact, I think either today, tomorrow, sometime this week, it's also going to be available on LinkedIn Learning. So there's two places that you can actually get access to this course. The other thing I have is the this notebook or this repo here, which is NoGIF Databricks 0 to ML Labs. I have a bunch of code in here that you can look at, different examples and tutorials and things like that. But now let's look at the official guide here for Databricks. And I'm going to go to their website. Here we go, Databricks Certification and Badging. So if we take a look at, there's quite a few certifications here for Databricks. And the one that I'm interested in is the professional Databricks Certified Machine Learning Associate. So I want to go for the hardest one to have. And this is really in my wheelhouse here, which is how to understand the Databricks machine learning and its capabilities like AutoML, Feature Store, and ML Flow, which again is all stuff that I cover in that other course. And so if you look at this, there's some learning pathways that they recommend. But let's talk a little bit about this minimum qualified candidate here. So in order to sit for the exam, what they're recommending is that you have some understanding of the Databricks machine learning. So this would be repos, clusters, jobs. In fact, I have some time today. I think I'll go into this a little bit and talk about it. Also, the runtime for machine learning, how AutoML works, the feature store, like what is it? What are some of the concepts? And then also ML flow, like what is it? What are some of the concepts? And then also exploratory data analysis, like what is it? Feature engineering, tuning, evaluation. And then in terms of how to implement machine learning solutions at scale, what are some concepts around distributed machine learning? Also, what are some of the modeling APIs that you can use? What is HyperOpt? How do you use the Pandas API on Spark? How do you use the Pandas UDF and Pandas Functions API? And then also, how do you get into things for classic machine learning like distributed linear regression, distributed decision trees, ensemble methods, etc. And so you can see the breakdown here is like, roughly like the first three categories are a third, and scaling the models is 9%. And so what do they recommend? They say go through this one of their trainings or a self-paced one here, which is the one I'm going through. You also could go through again the course that I created, which I think is pretty nice because to I guess toot my own horn a little bit. I taught this for a 4-week course live, and then I just shrunk everything down. And I've also taught this at the university level. So this is really like the most concise possible, like MLOps kind of thing you could study for Databricks. This might be one of the more efficient ways to study. Okay, that's the background. So let me go a little bit into the details of how I would recommend practicing, because practicing is, I think, one of the better ways to get started. Well, if you go to Azure, I think Azure really, in some sense, is kind of the dream environment to use Databricks. And part of it is because they have this direct integration right inside of Azure. So once you logged into the Azure environment, what's really cool about this is, look, there's an interface right here to Databricks. And so I don't think it can get any easier than this. And so you can go ahead and you can create new environments. You can do all this stuff right inside of your Azure account. In addition, there's a tremendous amount of documentation. If we go to Microsoft Learn, there's just so much stuff around Databricks on their platform, and so like the documentation is just amazing, right? So really between the fact that, and look at this, they just have so many really good guides here around Databricks. So I think between Azure plus the Databricks documentation, here for Microsoft Learn, it's really a great environment. So once you've done that, then you're going to get access to an interface that looks like this. So let's just do a really, really quick high level overview of some of the stuff that's important to know about here in terms of Databricks. So to start off with, this is just the kind of the sample console. And one thing that might trip you up initially is if we go over here, look, there's two modes. There's a data science mode and there's a machine learning mode. For the machine learning engineering certification, which is the one I'm interested in, this is the mode you want to care about. The reason why this is important is if you launch a cluster in here, it'll have different libraries. If you toggle this one, it'll have the right libraries. So I think it's important to most of the time make sure you're staying in this machine learning tab right here. Now, if we go to this interface, this gives you all the things that you should know. So I haven't yet taken the exam, but I'm assuming if I was going to write the exam, what I would ask someone, I would definitely ask them this, right? All of these things that are covered here, the workspace, the repos, the search interface, the data, the compute, all this stuff, everything that's here is going to be fair game for you. So let's just kind of walk through some of the things that are important to be aware of. So the first thing to be aware of is that in order to do anything, which is a pro and a con of Databricks, you're going to need to have a cluster. So how do we do a cluster? Well, we go through here and we go to compute, just like this, and we select create cluster. Now let's go ahead and create a cluster here. And now a few things to be aware of are that depending on how many credits you have available and what you're doing, if you're on the free tier, or that I think most of the time you want to start off with a single node, not a multi-node. You want to do a single node. And the reason for this is that you want to just kick the tires initially. So let's take a look at what this cluster would be called. We'll call this, single node here, single node notebooks, right? So we know that it's for notebooks. Now, this is the place that you could get tripped up is, okay, so what version of the software do we want to use? Well, look, there's standard, as I mentioned before, and there's ML. We want to use ML, right? So we want to do ML. And notice here that it'll also tell you what version of Scala, what version of Spark. And so the betas are probably not a good idea, right? Because, unless you're an expert, it's always a good idea to go with whatever is the normal version. So if you go through here and you select ML right here, this it'll say, it's got a problem here. The worker node is incompatible with that selected version. Now, in this case, though, we're doing single user. I'm not sure why. Oh, we don't want to do GPU. We want to do non-GPU. So GPUs, are a whole other thing that we don't necessarily want to get into, in that, especially if you're on a free tier or whatever. So we're just going to use regular CPUs here. And that's really all we care about. I mean, I could just even put a tag called like demo or like cluster type or something, cluster type, and put in demo. That way, if in the future, if I wanted to delete demo clusters, I would know which ones were demo clusters. And so the other thing too that's kind of cool to be aware of is that it'll auto terminate by default. And that is what you want. You don't want to have clusters just running, especially when you get into bigger machines. You do not want that. Like you want to have, systems that are be able to auto clean up. So once you've got the cluster running, what's the next thing that you should care about? We can go back over here and go back to, your workspace, and this is where you would build out new things. And typically, like a quick start guide, which will show, if we just go back to the main interface, this will show you some of the things that are probably a good thing to start off with. In terms of task, 1 would be creating a notebook, 2 would be doing AutoML, 3 would be training, a 4th one would be doing a feature store. And we could take a look at any of these different problems and try them out. Probably the first one that's easy is creating a notebook. And we could go through here and we could just say like, hello world ML notebook, and go ahead and create this. Once you've done this, it's going to need to have a cluster associated with it in order for it to run. And so in this case, you can see that there is a cluster, but it's not yet running because the cluster's been, actually it got terminated. The cloud provider was encountered with an error. The subscription is disabled. Therefore, it's marked as read-only. So I have to, in the future, do a couple little things to re-enable my subscription. But for the sake of what we're covering, it's not important. The main takeaway is that you need to create a cluster first. Next, you go through to the main interface here, and again, create a notebook, do some stuff, attach it to the cluster. A few other things that are high level important to be aware of is that you can schedule things, right? So you can run this notebook periodically and even send an alert. The other thing that you can do is that in terms of the workspace, notice that we've got this notebook here, which is, where is this thing called Hello World ML notebook right here, is that if I wanted to, I could always move this into a repository. Like if I go through here and I say, let's go to workspace, I right click, I can say export it, and I could take it locally, or I could also move it to another location, or I could go to repo, hook it into, in the case of GitHub, into one of these locations, and I could say like import and pull it from some location on my disk or from a URL and check that into the repo. So there's really the workspace, which is non-versioned. There's a repo, which is source control. And this is really where you would keep track of all your notebooks. The workflows would be, if you're going to go through and do some data engineering tasks here, that's where the workflows come in. The experiments would be when you're creating machine learning iterations, like you're, for example, doing AutoML, you would get access to the results of your experiment, look at the different training metrics, and they all show up in a window right here. And so this is a very big concept in MLOps, is to be able to periodically look at the experiments that you've run and other people on your team have run. The feature store is where you would have the features that you're going to use for machine learning managed and usable. And then if we go through here, models, this would be where your models are actually versioned and kept on the disk. Look, in this case, I have 4 different versions of the model, and you could then serve it out via your ML system. So that's really the high level, kicking the tires on Databricks. So what we'll do next week is I'm going to go through like step by step and just go through the guide for Databricks here, which is this minimum qualified candidate, and I'm just going to step by step address each one of these problems and do demos for them. So in the meantime, I think if you want to study on your own, I would say get an Azure account. That's probably one of the easiest ways to get started. 2, the O'Reilly course that I built either on LinkedIn Learning or on O'Reilly is a good place to start. And then next week, again, we'll go back and just periodically or methodically go through step by step and get this solved. So I will see everybody next week, and thank you for everybody who showed up. See you then.